This is the sound we start with. We're going to be going from a sound like this to a sound like this. Hi, it's been a while. Where have you been? Well, I am Resident Loser Jeremy, and I've been sitting right here, even when the camera's off. One question that comes up on the videos a lot is in regards to drums. I love to track drums. Sometimes I'm hiring players, sometimes I'm recording bands, sometimes I'm getting files from wherever they're coming from to mix, and sometimes I'm recording them. God forbid, because that's the worst option. Inevitably, samples come up in discussion. Do I use samples? Do I not use samples? If I have complete control over a situation, an unlimited time, unlimited budget, a great kit, a great player, I'm probably not going to use samples. But does that happen every time? You're delusional. There are a fair number of cases where, yes, you have to lean on samples. And that could be for any number of factors. There could be something mechanically wrong with the kit. They're just not hitting hard enough. Or, common issue, you just need to sample augment the kit to get it in the world of where they're trying to go with their reference and what that target audience is going to expect out of a drum kit. Now buckle up, because this is subjective city we're pulling up on right now. When you start talking specificity in tones and samples and sample players, there's going to be everybody with their own preferences and what they want out of a sound. I wanted to do a video where I actually show my process and how I do use samples, because it's come up a few times. I do use triggers sometimes, but more likely I'm making a Midi roadmap of what's happening with a real played kit. In a situation where I need to use samples, more than likely I'm going to lean on using it in a Midi context because it is so much more reliable to me. So I've wanted to make that video for a while, then lo and behold, along comes a sponsor, Hertz Instruments, with their Hertz Drum Bundle. A pack of samples in different kits, a red pack, a white pack, and a blue pack. Each one kind of giving their own spin and feel on drum samples. I go down the line and show how I'm using this sampler. I've used it on a lot of projects so far. At first, this was a video I wasn't really sure I wanted to do, then Hertz kind of sent along some of the plugins so I could get acquainted with it. I really, really liked them. They quickly found a home on my mix template. So far, I've used this stuff on multiple songs that I'm doing here. So yes, this is a sponsored video. Take that with a grain of salt. However, the principles that I'm showing in here are still valid for whatever sampler you're going to use. So let's get into it. So here we are in Pro Tools. This is a song that I recorded, I played drums on, and I am not a drummer. I can't hit the drums as consistently, as powerful, and as well as someone who actually knows how to play drums. So in a song like this that's heavy, that's congested, that is kind of meant to just be a little claustrophobic in places, there needs to be some sample augmentation to, one, account for my playing, and two, to kind of help poke those transients out above this sound, because that's the sound I'm hearing in my head. In this situation, I definitely do. Now, I am not the best person to show you how to MIDI writing in drum parts. That's not who I am. I can play a drum set and then kind of build around that. So what I'm going to be showing is how to use a drum sampler, like something like Hertz, or insert your own. Superior Drummer, Get Good Drums, anything like that. You can use it essentially the same using MIDI triggers from real drum. I find it to be way more accurate. You don't have to worry about the odd little phase shifting that happens from like an intersample perspective where sometimes they're not lining up exactly. This way you have an unparalleled amount of predictability when using something like MIDI. So I really like doing it this way. So let's start with what we have. We're going to be going from a sound like this to a sound like this. So real quick, let's take a look at the plugin itself. Hertz drums. Pretty predictable interface when you're looking at like a drum sampler like this. The more I dive into this, the more I appreciate what they've created here, because it's very easy to create the exact drum sound that you want with everything right here at your fingertips. So when you get Hertz drums, which I'm going to be putting a link to some free trials down below so you can check them out. If you want to purchase that, there will be links down there as well. And trust me, I have been in contact with these guys that are a part of this company, and without going into details, if the type of person behind a plugin like this is a factor in whether you support a company or not, these are good people. They're good people doing good work outside of the software world. We'll just leave it there. So when you enter Hertz, you're going to be presented, depending on the packs that you have. I have white pack, blue pack, red pack. Each one of these kind of have a different vibe to them. The red pack to me is by far the most interesting. However, if we want to take a look at some of these, so let's say you load up any preset, we have white metal. It's going to load all of that stuff in, but as we take a look around, we look down here, we have our numbers 1 through 15. Okay, cool. Mic A, B, and C. Interesting. Kick left, kick right, snare, everything's fairly predictable. I find myself not messing with the mixer nearly as much as I do this kind of little mini mixer up here in the corner. Let's go back to the sampler. This is loaded in. So we can quickly touch around the kit, see what's going on. Pretty cool. This is a metal kit off the white. My favorite one so far is red alt rock. This is the one I've kind of been playing with as a starting point. And watch how easy it is to combine this stuff. So here's the sounds we got here. The thing that's hard to sell with drum samplers like this is the room. And I feel like I'm in the room. This doesn't sound far off to me as something I could record in here with a good player, but I'm not a good player. So this immediately feels at home to me. The part that really surprised me was the overhead stuff. Listen to these, how clean these overheads are. The sense of space that you get, take for example this guy, this little bell over here. You can really hear the 3D space happening. Part that I didn't dig on this was the kick. If you find something that, okay, this is 90% of the way there, but I'm just not digging this kick, and I don't, we can click around here and find different kicks. And these are separated on the screen here in groups. So we have our sample libraries. Red pack right here that I'm on. This is blue pack. And then our other pack, white. I love kick 15 on the white. And from here we have different mics. So obviously with the one we're on now, if you liked that, you could pick different mics and mic positions on these different nodules right here, but I don't really like this one. I want to see what these other mics sound like. Right click it, and you've now changed that kick right there. And it's that easy. The snare. I want to find something with more of a transient on here, so ooh. I really like that brass. But I really like that right there. I love this. So real quick, let's make some actual MIDI triggers here. So a few different ways that you can do this. You can literally take your snare track and move it up to a MIDI track. Ta-da, now you have MIDI triggers for your snare. I find that not to be very accurate, and you can get a lot of extraneous things, especially with real drums recorded in a way that I did, and I'm not a drummer. Sometimes that works. For me, that's not all that fun. I like to do this by going to Midi DRT if you want. So let's pull up our snare. We're going to highlight it in the window, hit analyze. It's going to pull that in. So we have a lot of stuff happening here. These look like it's making triggers. We have loudness, sensitivity. So on this loudness scale, I'm going to go right in the valley between these two, because basically that's telling us, hey, you have a lot of transient information where it's really, really loud. That would tell me that's the main snare hit. That's the mic hitting the snare. And then you have a lot of information down here where it's not so loud. That could be things that are bleeding into the mic itself. So I go right in between those two, and I'm going to get mostly snare hits. Same thing down here. Sensitivity. How sensitive do you want these triggers to hit? I want to do the same thing. Let's lean towards the louder stuff. So now we end up with a much cleaner looking profile as far as what we're capturing. Over the arc here, I would like to crank the heaviest hits up to where they're about there. What you can do with this knob, you can flatten out the performance. I don't like to do that on a snare drum, because that's what's going to make this seem like a sample if there's no difference between the hits themselves. So let's get this back to default, and I just want to bring the volume up to where the heaviest hits look like they're darn close to as heavy as this thing can possibly sample 127. When we're happy with that, we just drag it over. So we move it up to a snare, and we're good. Let's do the same thing with the kick. So we're going to pull in our kick. Let's go get Midi DRT back. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull up that loudness, pull up the sensitivity. And this one gets a little more iffy to me, so let's bring that loudness a little higher. Now we're going to keep it about there. I'm fine with this. Now for a kick drum, I want it to be more consistent because I know myself as a player and I'm not that good. So I'm going to flatten out the performance just a little bit here. Not something, I don't want a perfectly flat performance, but I don't want my foot all over the place at the same time. That's going to make my low end a little unpredictable. If I was a better player, I could take care of it, but I'm not. Then I'm going to take the overall thing and put it pretty close to the ceiling because I would like that aggressive kick. But notice, it's still not perfect. There's deviations. That is kind of the difference between a really good player and a machine, and you can tell the difference. So we're going to drag this on. Now for this is a Pro Tools specific thing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy. If I click Option M, it's going to paste special, where it's going to merge those two MIDI parts. So now what I can do is come into my MIDI, highlight just the kicks, and then put them where they're supposed to go. Now we can really dig into what's possible up here in this little corner. You can switch mics here as well, down here as well, for whatever source that you're trying to get, but you also have pitch, trim, which is basically your overall volume of whatever source that you have. And for my kick, these are pulled back just ever so slightly because they're a little more prominent than something like the snare, which I want a little more out front in this context. From here, there's a super cool room and verb sound. Check this out. So we're listening to the sample snare here. So for me, I want to be about right in the middle, a little room, a little reverb. We can make our minimum as far as how hard we want to hit. A lot of these are pretty hard hits, so I'm going to bring it up at least, I mean, not all the way, but I'm going to put a limit on how dynamic I actually want this. And you can change the dynamics here. I would rather do it as far as telling it, I don't want you to trigger anything below this certain number, so it's going to come out like a heavier hit. The other cool part about this is controlling the bleed into other mics. So we have our DI overheads sub, which in this instance is like the sub snare, bottom snare. I think it's a language thing. So I thought it was like the subbiness of a snare drum, which was cool, but if we pull that up, we just see it's a bottom snare mic. So in this instance, I have a pretty cool bottom snare mic. I don't want a ton of that, but I'll keep it in there for context. But I can pull up overheads effects, and the direct signal of the snare. I'm going to play with that till I'm happy with it in the mix itself. That's pretty cool. So looking right here, we can see that our low fundamental on the actual snare is 165. So let's come over here, put another instance of Pro Q, and see where this snare is hitting. That's 223, so I'm going to drop the pitch of this snare, and I'm going to watch on Pro Q until we get about in the same area. And we'll do the same thing with the kick drum. Okay, so kick is hitting around 60. Now that is close enough for me, because it's hard to pinpoint exactly where I'm doing it because I'm hitting the kick so inconsistent that how hard I'm hitting is really changing the pitch of the kick itself. I love using samples like this. It doesn't sound too much like we're using samples. In a perfect world, I wouldn't need them. In this instance, I'm the player. However, there are instances where we can't control the player, and having a discussion like that is a little difficult. But in the instance like this and using samples like this, if the kit itself is decent, you can get by pretty heavy-handed with samples, but it's going to match the vibe of the kit. The other cool thing we can do here, say you're in a session, you've already recorded the drum, can't really go back and change much. Hertz has an option, and let's just bring up another track to show how this could really be cool. I had this little guy hiding behind the wings just to be extra sneaky. But let's go ahead and make it active, and I have Hertz, Billy Decker, a little Pro Q just to show me what's happening, nothing's actually here, and Vintage Verb. The cool thing here, if you want to make something like a snare bomb, there's a reverse button here and a length option. And you can do that with any source you want. So if I want overheads reversed, I can create swells, reverse swells into any part. So if I want to pretend it's like 2003 metalcore, obviously I'm not lining it up perfect, but you can put snare bombs all over the place. Obviously there's things just here where it's built by people who have used libraries like this before, and they're just making it easy. All the velocity is here. We have our attack, sustain, release, decay, all of that. It's ultimate control over your drum. The thing that gets me with using normal sample replacements like trigger, it's okay. I like doing it in some instances, but there's a certain level of inconsistency. Something like this using Midi that is never going to change if unless I change it and I have control over that. So I like sample augmenting in this fashion. A lot of times using samples from sample libraries like this, they're created with a bit more care, I'll say. And sounds like this they sound great. I haven't messed with the overheads a ton because that's not how I use drums like this. But for these sounds, this just takes it over the top for me. And a performance that was lackluster because I created it into something like this. Using MIDI like this, you can hop around to any number of samplers, not lose how you want to replace your drums, and you can float around to so many different sounds. With this one, it's especially easy to incorporate into any workflow because the key mapping is already there for it. You can come from Addictive Drums, Easy Drummer, Groove Agent, Steven Slate Drums, Superior Drummer, Logic if you want. Everything is here, and I love when companies do that because one of the most annoying things hopping between libraries is not having that middle ground there. So even using this to get from one to the other could be helpful if this isn't a sound you want. However, I do find this incredibly useful, and I really like these sounds. I'm really anxious to see what their next packs are going to sound like because, yeah, this is a metal song, but I'm not working on metal a lot. This is my own personal stuff, but I could definitely see some of the folkier things on here would be really, really cool. It's just in the way they're capturing these drums. It has just an organic feel. You can hear the room, you can hear the care taken to the instrument itself, and they're not overhyped samples, which is something that's a real big turnoff sometimes. So if you want to give these guys a try, there's going to be links to some trial versions, and if you want to purchase it, go ahead and purchase it there. I get nothing if you purchase that. That is no kickback to me whatsoever, but I do think if you try it, you are going to like it. Until then, if you're using Hertz or you're using anything else, go make some music. I'm Resident Loser Jeremy. I'll see you guys in the next one.